On March 8th, little fanfare, nobody paid attention to it. Barack Obama signed into law H.R. 347, the Federal Restricted Buildings and Grounds Improvement Act of 2011. Just a few weeks ago, he signed this into law.
And Grounds Improvement Act.
Grounds Improvement Act.
Well, that sounds innocuous.
Right. What this does, well, let me read one part of it. Under Section C, subsection B, a building or ground, who's under the influence of this? A building or grounds where the president or other person protected by the Secret Service is or will be temporarily visiting, you cannot have any kind of public protest, okay, under this law. You say, okay, what's the problem? The problem is that in this bill, the president gets to issue a ruling that says a certain building or a certain entity is entitled to Secret Service protection. They don't have to get it. They just have to be ruled as being entitled to it. And if they're entitled to it, you cannot protest at that facility. Right. I wonder who he might rule as being eligible for Secret Service protection. Could
Anybody?
It be abortion clinics?
Abortion clinics?
Oh, yeah.
They've already put federal marshals at abortion clinics, right? They've already done that. They did that long before, under Clinton. So under this law,
completely suspends the First Amendment.
It says this bill endows the president with the power to extend Secret Service protection to anyone he deems worthy. The president accomplishes such an act by way of issuing a memo. So he just writes a memo that says every abortion clinic in the country is entitled to Secret Service to protection. If you show up to do sidewalk counseling, if you show up to picket or to protest, the feds will be there to grab you. Now, people think when you say these sort of things that you're baying at the moon.
Or that you're nuts, and it didn't happen. They didn't hear about it.
That this will never happen. But let me tell you something. If you go back and you listen or read the transcripts of the RICO hearings, right? The RICO hearings clearly said that this would not be used to go after anything other than people involved in organized crime. And even somebody, a moral degenerate like Ted Kennedy, at that time, he raised a ruckus about the RICO. He said this will be used to go after labor unions, is what he was concerned about. And they wrote a provision into RICO to satisfy Kennedy that said, no, whoever is in violation of RICO must have a financial motive for being there, or that they're not subject to RICO. But then later on, when the Clinton administration wanted to apply it to pro-lifers, they issued another ruling that said, no, you do not have to have a financial motive.
That's right. And that's what they used to go after our friend Joe Scheidler.
And they said the financial motive that Joe Scheidler had in trying to save babies was the save baby. When he had a save baby at an abortion clinic, he was actually participating in that in a racketeering because his financial motive was the babies that were actually saved from abortion.
If we had all been standing up at the time of RICO and saying, oh, they'll use this to go after pro-lifers, people would have looked at you and said, you're nuts. The government doesn't do that. And now this thing happens. And like I said, we've got the Patriot Act.
You know, another example of that is when Lyndon Johnson passed the 501c3 laws. I mean, it just passed without any fanfare. And here we are in 2012, and churches are being prosecuted for speaking out how the Bible applies and how Scripture applies to political candidates. And they're being oppressed and silenced.